Welcome back to the All About Valley podcast. We have another comedian today, who's arguably funnier than me, you could say. But Gregor Mackay, I know you've done a lot of these podcasts, and we're talking about, I tried to watch them all back, but then I found out that I actually had to do other things because
you was very boring.
No, I mean, you're a really funny guy, and looking through your content on that, I was like, it's really, a lot of it's quite innovative, but we were talking about before we went on about how it's like, there's a lot of like, I feel like there's a lot of surface level conversations, especially when it comes to comedians. It's like, hey guys, look at this guy, he's funny, come watch, you know what I mean? And it's like, I quite like to like get to know people on like a sort of somewhat of a deeper level. And I was talking to Sean Chalmers, I don't know if you're familiar, because you were on his podcast as well, and he was talking about how comedy is sort of where he sort of found his home. I feel like he always felt like he didn't really have anywhere where he felt comfortable, and then he found comedy, and it was like this. It's this graph because you do suck at it at first, and you need to kind of keep going with it, and there's a lot of rejection with it. But he said he found somewhere where he felt comfortable. Is that something you could kind of relate to, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think comedy, not even just comedy, but being on a stage, probably for me, like that's where I feel most comfortable, because it's that time where you can just kind of, for however long it is, 20 minutes to an hour or an hour and a half, you can just kind of forget about everything else that's going on. And it's the same experience being in the audience, is that when you're there, and you're just doing whatever's going on at that moment in time. So yeah, well, I trained as an actor, so it kind of started with that it was always being on stage is the kind of most comfortable I feel. I find it the most difficult stuff I find is actually sitting, like you see, like in school doing a test or something like that. Those are the moments that I feel really under pressure. Whereas being on stage is kind of the opposite for me. But everybody's different. So
that's really interesting, because I feel like one of the most common things about what people find terrifying about being a comedian is like the idea of being on stage, and because I was somebody that could barely. I mean, the whole idea of me. If you told me as a teenager that I'd been doing a podcast, like talking to a microphone with cameras on and that, I'd be like, you are out of your mind. I would never do that. I was actually so terrified of public speaking in any sort of form, and that's like a very common thing. But where do, like, in terms of like, do you ever get that kind of way where you feel like you're talking about the acting? So would you say the acting is something that is would be beneficial for a lot of comedians in terms of taking away that nerves of being on the stage and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, but everybody's different, aren't they? I guess it's the same with musicians and singers as well. Like, it's probably, for a lot of them, a lot of creatives, it's just therapeutic to create stuff. And it's, whether it's acting or whether it's comedy or whether it's being a singer or playing a guitar, it's kind of all falls into the same bracket, where I think you get to a point where you kind of feel like you need it. Like, I definitely got to that point where I was like, when I don't have it going on in my life, I'm really sitting there feeling like slightly underwhelmed at what's going on in my life. Even if you're doing other things, you're just like, I really miss that feeling. I think it's the adrenaline for me more than anything. It's the within that 5 minutes before you're going on stage, you're sitting there like, well, this could go really right or it could not go really right. But it puts you in that kind of, is it fight or flight? Is that the expression? Yeah. Puts you in that mode, and the outcome of that, if it goes well, is incredibly refreshing. And if it goes wrong, that too can sometimes be quite good, because then you come away and think, well, how can I do that better? But for some people, that's really difficult, I think, trying to accept that you're not going to be liked all the time. But I don't know, I think things like the internet help with that. If you can take a slagging on a daily basis, you can go on stage in front of a bunch of randoms and get the same treatment.
Especially in Scotland, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Toughest cricket. I want to say cricket, but it's not that. Toughest critics.
Yes, exactly. No, there's very much a culture of like kind of somewhat slagging people off, and just like that sort of way of being Scottish. So then having the actual balls to be a comedian in front of crowds like that, it's very commendable. But like, I don't know how you handle the idea of like going up there and it just, what does it feel like when you go up there and it just totally goes not to plan? Like, are you just standing there going, I need to run away? How do you, I mean, like, because from when you talk about if it goes wrong, you can kind of learn from that. I think that kind of attitude is applicable to a lot of things in life. When you go through something that's a difficult situation, or that feeling of, because there's that feeling of rejection, that isn't it, when you go on stage and you're wanting this to go well and the crowd just go, we're not having you tonight, so like, do you think that that's helped you in your overall life?
Yeah, I think it's pretty humbling. Like, I think as well, if you're doing, a lot of comedians will have a club set, so they know the material that's going to work week in, week out, and they'll change it and they'll try new stuff. But if you have a set that you've seen absolutely smash it, like when we go on tour, I know that, those are people that have come to see you. So I know that material works for them. But sometimes you could take 20 minutes of that set and do it in front of an audience at a small bar somewhere in Dumfries that you've never been to before, and nobody laughs. But in your head that, hang on, I did this in front of like 300 people last week and everybody was laughing. And you just realise that sometimes it's just not your night. And it's actually not necessarily the material, but just maybe the way maybe it just wasn't there for you. The environment sometimes isn't right either. But I think a lot of comedians sometimes use that as an excuse to be like, well, the environment was rubbish. But I'm like, well, actually, it's obviously something you're doing as well, because people are there to laugh. So I think if you can just look at it that way, which is, don't be too hard on yourself, but don't give yourself an excuse every time. So find a balance. Be like, right, what can I work on? And also, how could it have been better anyway? There are other things. So don't be too hard on yourself, but also give yourself, some stuff to work towards. And I think you have to be like that, or else you'll never improve. But it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really is very. It's like a motivational clip for life, that way. Speaking there, because it's almost like you're, when you being overly self-critical ends up being this spiral of just going in circles and saying, fuck's sake, I should have done that better, I should have done this better. But then there's a certain point where that just becomes unproductive.
Yep.
And having the kind of self-esteem and self-confidence to be like, I had a bad night, but doesn't mean I'm a bad comedian.
Yeah.
And that's like something I think a lot of people struggle with in all areas of life, is like, you do something bad once and then your head can be a dangerous, tough place to be sometimes. And it's like, if your own opinion of yourself is overly harsh all the time, that's just going to continually beat you down. I think having that attitude of being able to be like, I can still maintain a level of confidence in myself despite something not going to plan is really important.
Yeah. I think, touching on what you're saying there, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I'm really self-critical. But I also think that I've always kind of been like that, and before when we didn't have an audience, or when I hadn't done all the stuff online or whatever, I was purely doing it for the love of wanting to do it, and I really enjoyed creating stuff at that time. And then it got to a point where, right, suddenly people are paying an interest in what you're doing, and then you get critique and you get all this other stuff, and suddenly now when you go to write things, you feel a pressure that wasn't there before, because now you feel like, well, I've done something and now I need to keep growing on it. So you become harder on yourself, constantly being like, am I doing enough? You're looking at other people in the scene that or whatever, and you're like, right, why am I not doing that just yet? Why have I not quite achieved that? And it can be very negative. But on the other side of that, if it's a double-edged sword, the other side of that as well, it's that way that you think that keeps you pushing and it keeps you wanting to work hard. So I try not to look at it as a super negative thing, that I'm quite self-analytical and quite self-critical, but rather that is something that I know keeps me pushing and keeps me doing it, because rather than, getting upset about it, what I'll do is use that to then push me into doing more stuff.
100%, I think. But
you have to be aware of it, don't you? You need to know that you're like that. You need to know that you are quite self-critical.
Yeah, and it's just having that awareness and having the balance to be like, being critical on this is objectively productive, and then when you start being overly personal on yourself, that's when you should be able to realise that this is going in a different area. This area actually isn't anything to do with comedy, it just means I need to go to therapy.
Yeah, exactly. I think all comedians need a little bit of therapy, though, to be honest. Or therapy is why people, a lot of people find that their comedy is therapeutic to them. That's why they do it. I mean, like you said earlier, one of the reasons that you do it, I think it's definitely that. Like, a lot of the sketches that I write or stuff that I've done are the sort of thoughts that I have in the shower. like just pure random, like really weird things that I would never say in the presence of just normal day life in front of family or pals. But on stage, suddenly I'm given the license to do that, like singing a song about seagulls. Like, come on, fuck, it's weird. Like, it's just really weird. If you did that just randomly, people wouldn't know why, but you create a way for you to do that, and I think there's
a freedom to it. There's like but when did the singing come into it? I'm curious, because not a lot of comedians sing, but you seem to manage to have a really it makes it a bit more unique, I feel like.
Yeah, well, it always kind of started because I always thought that when I was growing up, some of the stuff I used to love the most was variety shows, that sort of thing. And maybe I didn't necessarily think it was the funniest stuff, but it always stood out to me when people were singing songs. Like, I mean, obviously I grew up loving Billy Connolly, and he started out as a musician, and then he started to talk more during the sets, and then he kind of combined the both, and it was, I think it was people like that, and even the early days of like Chewing the Fat, sometimes they'd have jingles, and it was always those that I was always singing the next day when I was in school. And it's things like that stick with you. And I thought, when I started doing, I was always a musician when I was younger. And when I started the group with the boys, we were always like, well, I think we should put some songs in it. Might not be the funniest stuff in the world, but I think it's just very different, and it allows people to get like something stuck in their head, like a bit of an earworm. And that's kind of why we started doing it. And also, it allows you a platform to talk about things that if you said it as a piece of dialogue, it wouldn't be funny. Like, to say, if I was a comedian, I stood with a mic and said, by the way, have you seen the fucking size of the seagulls in Aberdeen? They're massive. It's not funny. It's a purely like surface level joke. But suddenly when you add harmonies into it and you add in a bit of like dancing and then you sing it melodically, suddenly you might be a bit more drawn to it. And that's kind of like what my whole thing with comedy is it's taking things that are pretty surface level, but finding a way to make it relatable to people. And that's kind of always, I hope I'm doing it all right, but that's kind of always what I've tried to do.
Well, I think you're doing it well. It's a bit of a throwback, I feel like, comedy-wise, in terms of
it's trying to
what the kind of fundamentals of it are. And then you talked about, obviously, the group you have. What do you think of that? And what's really interesting to me about this is, like, every comedian has different styles and different ideas. So like when you three come together as a group, is that, you know, you must all have quite a similar creative flow in terms of coming to that agreement. What made it be, you know, why the three of you together? Why, you know, how did it end up being the three of you doing that? Yeah,
well, we started it in uni, so we were all training as actors together, and we had to take a show at the Fringe, like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and we didn't want to do a play. We're like, I don't want to do that. So I naively thought I could write a comedy show. So I couldn't write long form stuff, so I just started writing sketches. And then before we know it, Elliot plays guitar and we started writing some songs together. We had an hour of random material and we were like, let's just do that. Let's just put it all together and run it and then take that to the Fringe. And I think working with other people, everybody is a little bit different. We all have our different things that we find personally funny, and then we also have that kind of group mentality of what works as a group. But I think for us, the biggest reason I think Ouija's works is it's not necessarily that we all have the same style of comedy, but I feel like when you look at us, you can kind of compare it to those three guys that used to sit in the back of your French class at school. I was just having a laugh with each other. And a big thing for me is it's not necessarily the comedy of the show, but it's the relatability in the three of us that people like. It's you've got to be yourself. You've got to be engaging with each other, and we improv a fucking shitload. Like it to the point where you would sit there and think some of that is staged. Yeah, you're deliberately laughing there, and sometimes we are, but there's always something that wasn't meant to happen. And that's just a trust. It's just trusting each other, and I think that's kind of what makes it work for the three of us.
That's amazing, because it's like that chemistry as friends on stage, and you're just able to kind of riff off that, because I think it's a lot of just being able to be yourself. And we talked about this before the podcast started, like actually people, there's a big want for any audience to want to know you and connect with you and know who you are as a person. So when you're having that kind of connection, it can come through, and that's most likely why it's doing so well, on top of the fact that these are really funny. But like you know, we spoke about a wee bit about as well, like how there's this perception of you are how you are on stage all the time.
Yeah.
And it made me kind of curious, like, you know, in terms of you on stage and off stage, what would you say is like the biggest difference?
Well, the one I get a lot is, and I know this is, I'll do a deeper dive into it, but the one I always get a lot whenever people like they recognise you or whatever, it's always like, you're a lot taller than I thought you'd be in real life. And that's it, but it's a good example, because what it shows you is people are going to make, they're going to make a preconceived notion of you before they meet you, right? Or before they really know who you are. And that's your own, not fault, but that's what you've given them. So how can you expect them to know anything else? So when it came to the TikTok stuff, in the earlier days, doing all the Scottish movies things, they're quite wacky and they're quite off the ball. So I think when people see that and then they meet you, they're like, well, he's quite relaxed. He's actually quite chill. I don't think my friends would describe me as that, but you know, when I meet people, that's kind of sometimes what they say. They're like, oh, I thought you'd be a bit more off the wall than this. Or even some people might think you're a bit more mature than maybe they thought you would be. Is
that just because you're sober though?
Well, a lot of the time, but that's another thing, right? You see, even going out, I find it way more difficult going out and meeting people when I'm in that environment of when I'm drinking and stuff. I'm always really nice to people, but there's always a bit of a danger, isn't there? You're always a bit like, oh, what if it goes wrong, or what if I'm not what they want you to be, and that sort of thing. And that's hard to play with, because you've got this thing in your head which is like, when am I turning it on and when am I just being myself? Mm-hmm. And I think every comedian probably goes through that, even the ones that are very, I mean, we have a brand and a name, and it's under different stuff, but even the comedians that do it just as themselves, even they must think that, like, you know, you're a very funny person, but in real life isn't always like that, you know. So it's like, when are you turning it on, when are you turning it off? It's interesting. In
terms of like your personality on stage as a comedian and how it's all kind of wacky and such, like, there's, you know, people have different sayings. Some say it's like themselves turned up to 100 or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, how did you find? Because I hear a lot of comedians talk about how they sort of found their personality on stage. There's, like you say, is not exactly who you are in regular life. But what, you know, at what stage did you feel like you found that? Like, you were like, this is where I want to go down with this, because obviously you blew up on TikTok in a pretty massive way. It's got a massive following on that. But like, before you even posted any of them, was there a moment where you thought, this is the way I want to do this, this is the style I want to have, and I'm going to go down this route?
I don't know. I mean, not particularly. I don't think there was ever a defining moment where I was like, oh, this is it. But there's definitely been moments that have kept me in it. There's definitely been moments things that we've experienced that I'm like, well, this is why I'm doing it. And this is why you keep hustling, you keep trying to graft, and you keep trying to make this a viable career for yourself, because it's those little things that you just won't get from anything else. For example, like, you know, we did the Pavilion back in September. I remember going there as a wee guy and thinking, well, that's something I'd always want to do. And before you know it, not only are you doing a show there, but it's a show that you've written. And a lot of that stuff I would write sitting on my own, you know, in my bedroom, or like shower thoughts. And now I've got this many people coming to see it. And that, for me, like, that's where I felt that sense of belonging, is knowing that, well, those weird little crazy thoughts that I've got, somebody obviously quite likes it. And I think it's through the writing that I think I find that sense of, this is why I'm doing it. And those are the moments that's why you create and why you do it. Being on stage, it's different. I mean, it'll probably be, the boys will probably have different answers than me. I get a bit more nervous about it purely because it's stuff I've written. So if people don't laugh, I take it way more like, oh shit, I'm not very good, than maybe they would. They could probably brush it off. So I think for them, they probably have different answers, but I think it's through the writing that I found that that reason for wanting to do it.
Yeah, like you're trying to find that what's the word, relatability to
exactly.
through the writing, and it does come across like you can tell that it's genuine and it's from you, and it's I think that's really cool, because a lot of the process of actually wanting to be in comedy is finding what niche you want to be or where you want to go down. Even this whole podcast is an example of that, like, because I was like, I don't really, everybody's got a podcast, right? Everybody has a podcast, I know this, but it was very much realising that, like, everyone has a podcast, but nobody no one that I can see in Scotland anyway in a wheelchair has a podcast. And I thought, like, there's that way of you feel like you don't want to have people feel as alienated as you once were, so it's like you want to try something new and find the relatability in these kind of conversations to show people that the stigma that's there for it doesn't need to necessarily be there. But that's kind of, I'm going on a different tangent.
No, keep going. I agree. I think you're right, and there's a similarity there as well, because I guess with anyone, like an actor, a musician, a comedian, you do feel that thing of like, well, that's how you're just going to view me, because that's the thing that I do, but it isn't as deep as to who I really am, you know, like there's a lot more to it than that. And I think, yeah.
Do you think when you were doing that acting and things like that, see the difference between acting and doing the comedy? Do you see, like, because obviously acting is you're being someone else, so then when you're doing the comedy, you're trying to be more yourself, and I in my head I feel like that transition would be somewhat difficult, in the sense of you're playing a part, you're going from playing a part to then going on stage and wanting to be authentically who you are. But is there any sort of, was that kind of a difficult transition in that sense?
Well, I think initially, I mean, obviously what we do is it's sketches and there's characters, and it's very heightened, and so in argument to that, yeah, I guess we still do kind of hide behind, like, a thing, but it is difficult. It was a difficult transition, because when we started doing all the sketch stuff, we trained, so we were just like, right, don't ever engage with the audience, do a sketch, do a song, do a sketch, do a song, go off, and that's it. But the more we started doing it, we realised that the thing that really seems to be working for us is the engagement that we have with the audience. At all times you need to make them feel a part of what you're trying to do, because it's a fucking weird thing to try and sell to somebody, like a song about a Scotch pie. Where you start trying to, like, serenade somebody in the audience, like, that's a weird thing to do. But you need to make them feel a part of it. So I think that was when the kind of make it more genuine to yourself came into it, which was those little bits. But before every song, we always introduce what the song's about. We always talk a bit about it. We'll always have a bit of banter between us. And I think it's those moments that you see us, and then everything else we can be a bit more facade about it and do sketches and songs and kind of show off what... I feel like what we try and create is, it's meant to look shit. Like, overall, it's meant to look a bit thrown together and a bit silly. But actually, we've worked on that loads. And there's a lot of talent behind the kind of the process of trying to harmonise these songs and getting them right, and making sure that each song is a minute and a half or no more than 2 minutes. But we don't need you to see that part. We'll do that. But what we want you to see is the comfortability and the enjoyment that we get from doing it.
Yeah, the camaraderie almost.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes into the making it, that was hard. That was hard. It's not so much about finessing, because as an actor, that's kind of what you want. You want to do the best that you can to be this other thing. Whereas for this, it was actually a bit more like, well, yeah, I've got that side of me it's a bit of a perfectionist, and I want it to be the way that it's going to be. But at the same time, if I'm trying to be more honest with myself, it's actually just making sure that you're having a good time. So if I'm just engaging with you and trying to make you feel part of it, if I see you laughing, I will laugh back, or I will smile, because that makes me happy. So it's engaging with that side of myself, which is knowing that it's the people that are there that make it for us.
Yeah,
because we have a laugh with each other regardless. So
yeah, but it's such a good point, because I think people you can make it being something else or being yourself, and being yourself is so much more rewarding than any other way of doing it, because I think it's just you're able to let loose, and the fact you're doing it with your friends, and
it's just a laugh in it.
But the fact it's actually see how when this starts to, when you start to realise like this is working, people are engaging in this, we're selling tickets, and TikTok and social media and all that, it's all blowing up. Like, that must have been really overwhelming, I feel like, in a sense of like, this had actually this is, because when I mean honestly, I've turned notifications off my phone, right? Because if I put a tweet out and for some reason it was to blow up, there's some weird thing that happens to me when you go, is that 1,000 likes? What's that? Like, what is that? What is that I said there? And then people are saying all these nice things, and it's great. And then somebody says something bad, and you're like, oh, now all I can think about is that one bad thing somebody said.
Yeah.
So like, in terms of the way that all kind of came about, if you was it difficult to kind of get, like, in terms of actually realising like this is working? It must have been such an amazing feeling, but like you said earlier, also just kind of like, oh no, people are actually watching me now, and think about what I'm doing here.
I think social media in general, you have to be in the right headspace for it, because like, I mean, I started making that stuff in lockdown, and in the latter half of it, and it's no sob story. We all went through what we went through, but I had a not a great time towards the end of it, and that's when I found stuff was kicking off more. So that was giving me the strength to want to make more of that stuff, because I knew it was working. But you viewed the negativity at that time way worse, because you were already in a negative state of mind, and I found that really difficult. But I also found it one of the best learning experiences I've ever had, because now I've realised that back then it was all about trying to go viral. And it was, because we weren't able to go out, wasn't able to do stuff. So I was just sitting there like, all right, I need to do this thing, I need to do that. I used to like it before it got big, and then when it started getting big, I had to keep feeding the cycle, because that's how TikTok works. If you can get a couple of videos to hit, they'll push you. And I thought that was helping me, but it wasn't. And then I realised when I stopped doing it and focused more on the boys again, when things were coming back, I realised like, yeah, it's weird when you blow up and you kick off, and sometimes a video will go viral, but at the end of the day, like, it's just views, and it's just people on the internet. Like, yeah, it can be, I think when you really notice it is when people interact with you in public. I think that's when it's more real. Or when you see kind of some of the opportunities that have been able to come from you doing all that stuff in your bedroom or sitting making videos. But yeah, social media is a challenge, and I think I get why there's a lot of people who don't want to do it, that are comedians, that like, I don't want to post videos because, you know, I just enjoy showing up to the gigs and doing the gigs. I don't care about having a big following. It just depends what you want from it. But I can totally see why some people don't want to do it, because it can be difficult, and if you're not ready to embrace what having some random 15-year-old acting like he's Simon Cowell, you know, on your videos, if you're not ready to deal with that, then don't do it, because everyone gets it. But it's a sign of you doing well. When people start hating on it, that shows that you're doing well, because you're reaching people that you wouldn't normally reach. So,
well, you'd rather have somebody, see, the thing is, the worst reaction is no reaction, in the sense of drawing people in comedy wise, and you're going to have people that love you and people that hate you. That's the same with everything really. But I think like, it's that, when you're talking about how that kind of got you through it, I think there's that need for that validation from people online as well.
Yeah.
Just everywhere, and it's a very common thing. Like when I was talking to Sean the other day, he spoke a bit about like how he was, you know, he would be this really, you know, outgoing, funny person that would help anybody, but, you know, in terms of him allowing himself to actually feel emotion and look at himself, he found that a lot more difficult. And that there's a lot to get made about comedians that are like struggling with like mental health and things like that. You look at like guys like Robin Williams and stuff like that, and me and Sean had a kind of great chat about how he had to kind of go through that process. But in terms of yourself, and like when it comes to like self-acceptance and sort of the process of dealing with sort of mental health struggles, what has that kind of been like for you? I know that's kind of a deep question,
Yeah,
right?
no, it's good. Do you know what? I think resilience has probably been one of my strongest friends through that sort of thing. It's like, I think everybody should talk about when they're, not feeling great or when things are going on in their lives. But for me, I actually found that, see, during that time with like making the videos and whatnot, it was that resilience to just keep doing it. I don't really think about it. I was just kind of like, oh, it's distracting me, and everybody's different, but I'm definitely one of those people who needs to throw themselves into something. And sometimes you don't realise when you are going through it that you're like, oh fuck, this is really difficult. I'm finding this quite hard. And I've had loads of conversations with pals about this, with the shows and stuff, and the bigger that we're getting and the tours that we're doing. And sometimes I sit there and you do get a little bit of imposter syndrome, and you're like, fuck, am I actually any good? Because I think sometimes I'll play it down and be like, well, we're just different. There isn't really much like this. And I'll be like, well, it's all surface level comedy, and it's all, not to be taken too seriously, and it's more about us getting on as pals. And I hear myself doing that sometimes, and I'm kind of like, but why do you feel the need to say that to somebody else? Is that because you're a little, you don't enjoy it and you feel a bit unhappy about it? Or is it because you just don't want somebody to think you're a prick, or that you take pride in what you do because, for whatever reason, you don't want to be seen to be glorifying or showing off? And that's kind of the thing that when it comes to mental health that I really think about, is that how do I sometimes try and portray myself, or like when I shoot myself down, like why am I actually doing that? And do I need to do that? Like, I think sometimes I'll walk into like green rooms with other comedians, and I don't know if it's because there's three of us and we're a bit different with the musical side, but I know that sometimes I'll instantly try and really get on with people and be their pal. I've always kind of been like that. But the older I'm getting and the more that I'm doing this, I'm becoming aware of that I'm like, I don't need these people to like me, because they're going to make their own decisions anyway. But what I need to not do is sit when they're not there and worry about that over and over and over again, about like, why aren't people liking me or accepting me? Because that's kind of I guess for me that's the thing to deal with.
It's that idea of like, it doesn't matter how many people from the outside accept you if you don't accept yourself. And
yeah.
And I think what you're talking about there as well is like the idea of not wanting to come across too arrogant or too, and I think that comes back to as well a part of the Scottish culture of like, I don't want to come across like I'm doing too well here.
Is that called tall poppy? Is that tall poppies? I think that's what it's called, maybe.
Yeah, I've never actually heard that statement before, but I think it's the whole premise of the idea is just that, we live in a country that's sort of programmed to put each other down a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, we could have a world champion and be like, it's all right, you know what I mean? And it's I think when you're wanting to kind of go in somewhere and maybe somewhat put yourself down, I think there's two parts to that. One part also is just not knowing what's going on with that other person and maybe not wanting them to feel bad about themselves. So if you're talking to another comedian who's maybe not selling as much as you, or maybe isn't having as good a time as you are right now, and you go in and be like, I'm smashing this, mate, I'm having a great time. And they're like, oh cool, I'm not really doing too well.
Because on the reverse end, if you've been through it like that's how it feels. And I know that like sometimes you want to mute your Instagram stories because you see your pals are like smashing it, and you're like, I'm so happy for you and it's amazing, but I don't need this right now because it's made me think I'm not doing enough. It's that sort of thing where you do need a balance.
It's like there's such a easy way of comparing yourself now, because you can see what everyone's doing all the time. So if you see somebody selling out something or doing something like that, you go, what am I not doing? Can I do this? Make sure I'm there.
That's the thing.
And you're constantly kind of spinning in circles with that. But I think like there's a big difference between being confident and having belief in yourself to maybe being kind of arrogant and full of yourself. I think confidence there's this idea that confidence means that you're a bit of a prick in Scotland, which in general places, but I just think the culture that we have, that is a part of it, where it's like you're not really allowed to come across like you're too proud of yourself, because you're like, that guy's full of himself, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're touching on there a wee bit. But you obviously, the fact you're even aware of that though is like something that's quite interesting, because I feel like it shows you how much you kind of take into consideration other people's feelings and thoughts, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a misconception then, that when we were talking about that earlier about, well, how do like people maybe view you when they or what's one thing they get wrong? I think maybe it's that, is that I do really think about things, and I think about every interaction and conversation that I have with somebody or people, and even when I'm during the conversation, there'll be times that I either think about something I've just said to you, or maybe it's something you've said, and I might read it really wrong in my head, but I won't say anything. So I'll be like, oh no, I've totally like, not about them, about me. I'll be like, I've just totally embarrassed myself there. Like, why did I ask that? That was weird. And I don't think I've never really lost that. And yeah, I think when you meet people as well, other bookers or comedians and whatnot, I still get that. If anything, I probably get more nervous when it's them than when it's just like pals that aren't in the scene or whatever. And maybe sometimes that can make you come off a bit awkward or weird. But it is that I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm like, oh, how did I come across there? Was that all right? Was that too much? Was that not enough to, it's weird.
Yeah, because people have this idea of you of being this really confident, outgoing person, which it comes across, but also there's this idea that having that confidence means that you don't have overthinking or nerves or anxiousness about things. But all of those emotions are true. It's just a case of the most confident person you've ever met in your life still has anxious thoughts and still has, weird moments. Like, confidence is just a belief in yourself that you can have those feelings, but you can still push forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's weird because for so long I was like, I want somebody to tell me how to feel confident and good about myself. Do you know what I mean? But you realise that a lot of the time, you have those doubts, you have those thoughts, but you just decide that's not what I'm going to listen to today.
Yeah,
I'm going to be proud and confident in what I can do and go and deliver that.
There's one thing touching on that when you think, right, I need to, fuck all that. There's one thing I always think of, and it's that people probably don't give as much as a fuck as you think they do. And that is quite humbling in some ways, because it's kind of like, people don't care about you as much as you think that they do. They've got their own fucking lives to deal with. So if you think you may have come off wrong to somebody, or you think that somebody might be thinking a certain way about you, the reality is they're probably just like you. They've got their own shit going on. They've got so much going on in their lives that, right, something might not have been right there, but it's not worth your time thinking about it. And that's where I think the confidence comes into it, is that it's knowing that. I'll do that to myself. I'll tell myself they probably don't give as much as a fuck as I think they do. Like, if we don't have a show coming out, I might sit there and think, oh, we're dying off, man. Like, this is that. We don't have a show next month. Like, we're going to lose all the audience. The reality is, they're probably not sitting there thinking that. They've got their own lives to be concerned about, and it's good to do that.
You can become your own worst bully that way.
100%. Yeah.
And you're so spot on with that. Just like how everyone's main priority is themselves. Do you know what I mean? And you can be a really kind, thoughtful person that cares about people, but while you're sitting thinking, oh, I accidentally said something silly, like that wasn't true about me. Like I once said to somebody that like it was just a total off the ball comment, and then I thought we'd come back to it, but I think it was like on a night out or some years ago, right, somebody asked me why I was in a wheelchair, and I said, oh, I got hit by a bus. But I thought that I would, so then right after I said that, she was shocked, and then And then she was like saying to her pals to get back. But then I was trying to tell her it was a joke, but then somebody came in.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's people out there, somewhere out there, that think that I'm a loser because I can't play bass. And you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that now. But then you sit and think about it, but then you realise as you kind of mature that's that person literally didn't think about that again. Do you know what I mean? It was like for 2 seconds, but like you're totally right in the sense of like everybody's main priority is themselves, in the sense of we all have our own lives, and it's important not to beat yourself up. It's even if somebody is giving you pelters for a wee thing like that really reflects badly on where their head's at more than anything else. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's also having the ability sometimes to, and it's something I've been trying to work on the last couple of years, is having the ability to recognise that you don't have to take things so personally either. That sometimes people will say and do things because they have stuff going on as well. It's not just you, and it's being aware of that. But then also, like I've just as an example, I have some pals who they really don't like you talking too much about what's going on in their life. They might tell you something in passing over a pint, and they just want it left at that, you know. But then I'm thinking in my head, well, I need to talk to them about it now. Oh, we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to do that because you've opened it, and I need to be there as a friend. I need to do all that. But to be their friend, they don't want you to do that. They want you to just accept it, and they're like, let's just, move on from it. So I think it's that ability to also play it the way that other people are as well. Like, know that, like, respect it. Yeah. Or that if they've said something to you, just know that that's how they do things. It's not maybe how you would do it. So don't take it too personally.
It's not about being there for them the way that you want to be. It's the way they need it.
Yep.
And everybody's been. We're all made up of what we go through in life and how we've all processed things. So the way somebody reacts to something you say, could have nothing to do with what you've actually said, and everything to do with how they're feeling that day, or what they've got going on in their life. And we're so quick to be like, "Why did you do that to me?" Rather than like, well, they've got something going on that's got nothing to do.
Yeah. It's like when people cancel on you last minute. If you made a plan to see a pal or whatever, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm cancelling." You might take it really, offensively and be like, "Oh, well, they should have given me more notice," or like, "What's that all about? Like, they obviously don't like me. They don't want to see me." But it's having that reassurance that, like, it's actually okay for somebody to do that. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, let them do what they've got to do, and don't take offence by it. It's
exactly. Do you know? I'm really enjoying actually having these kind of conversations, and not because I've had a few conversations like this, obviously during the podcast, but not necessarily in the place I'm in now, where I believe more what I'm saying now. You know what I mean? I think I was saying it before, and I felt it to be true, but I don't know if I actually was applying it to myself. I was like, here's how you can live your life. I'm still on this. I'm still like really struggling away. So it's great to kind of have these in a genuine sense. But I put out a wee Instagram story and asked some people for some questions for you, and I got some interesting questions.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But some of these questions are quite funny, right?
All right. Is it people I know?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know, but I think you follow them, so I think you do know them. There's a guy called Thomas Jeffrey.
I do know that name.
Sounds like the guy for Game of Thrones. But so I just, because I'm quite good at remembering a lot of things I want to talk about, but I was just thinking about these questions, and because they were so kind of unusual. But I'll start with a funny one. Right? It was what are your top 5 sauces to put on fries?
Sauces to put on fries?
I don't know why this person's asking that. But
who was that? Who said that?
That was that.
Name and shame.
That was that. It was his name is
Oh, right, is that Tom?
Thomas.
Top 5 favourite sauces. I don't know, man.
I've got some controversial opinions when it comes to that.
Oh, do you?
Because I would be like mayonnaise first.
Well, yeah. I was actually just about to say that.
Mayonnaise first.
Yeah, probably, to be honest, maybe garlic mayo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you know, I don't know what it is. I think maturing is going from tomato sauce to mayonnaise to garlic mayo. That's what it is. Like,
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. That's pretty philosophical.
because when I was younger, it was always just tomato sauce for it. That was the main thing.
What about brown sauce though? That's quite a contender.
See the brown sauce thing, right? I like barbecue sauce. But
Oh no, I can't stand it.
no.
It's too sweet, man. Can I have it on ribs or wings? But you see, it's just a condiment as a side. You can fuck that.
that shows that we're different because you said barbecue sauce is too sweet. But I actually think brown sauce is too not sweet.
All right,
which is why I don't like. So there you go. Taste buds are different there.
Yeah.
But
so top 5 then. So mayonnaise definitely number 1, right? Mayonnaise. So when we say mayonnaise, does that include all variations of mayonnaise? So I can't say mayo and garlic mayo.
I think mayonnaise and garlic mayo are different enough to
Okay.
categorise it into different. I think, but
Fuck, this is getting harder then.
But see, the thing is, it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
There's certain things where I'd choose garlic mayo over mayo, but if it was chips, I would choose mayo on its own all the time.
Yeah, like if you were getting mozzarella sticks and you didn't get garlic mayo. That's psycho, mate. That's pretty bad.
Exactly. But see, the thing is, it's kind of interesting that 1 and 2, like you've got kind of easy there with it. You could go for mayo, garlic mayo, but then 3, 4, and 5 is where it gets kind of tricky for me. I don't know what I would rank as my 5th favourite sauce.
Yeah, I like that one. The what is it? Pink sauce.
Oh yeah, like kind of a
Pecora sauce. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite good.
That's really good with chips.
Do you know what's good as well? Southwest sauce.
Don't think I've ever had that.
What, like what have you not? Or like Subway or that?
Is that chipotle?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, like chipotle sauce.
Yeah, but it's like a different. Well, yeah, that I suppose it would be the same thing.
Is it like mayonnaise or is it more like buffalo?
It's more like buffalo.
Right.
It's quite nice, but
Aye.
like,
Maybe not on chips though. I feel like that's quite.
no, I'm talking. I went into more like Subways and burgers and things like that, you know. But brown sauce would definitely not be in mine.
Would they not? Aye. Maybe brown sauce. Do you know what? Probably salt and sauce. I've really kept my missus lives in Edinburgh, and I never really used to like salt and sauce, but I've really come round to it recently. So if you'd allow me to count that as one of them, I'd probably put that up there. So mayonnaise, garlic mayo, brown sauce, chippy sauce, and maybe sweet chili, man. Keep it.
Yeah, sweet chili. We haven't mentioned that, but sweet chili would be my top 5. 100%. Yeah. I would agree with that.
So what's your top 5 then?
I would say it's very similar to that, but I would probably replace brown sauce with. Well, do you know what? Actually, I think tomato sauce should be in this.
Oh, I didn't even put tomato sauce in that.
Like, we haven't mentioned this, but tomato sauce should be in the top 5 though. It's not my go-to, but I'd say it should be in the top 5, personally.
But I don't know if we're just talking chips though, and I had the options. I don't know if tomato sauce would ever replace any one of those 5 options for me. So,
yeah, because when I think about it, I probably have mayo, garlic mayo, sweet chili above tomato sauce, but I'd probably have tomato sauce in there rather than brown sauce, personally. But
there you go,
that's probably the only change I would make to it. So that's something I've never.
It's just my walkout moment where I fucking shove the mic. I'm done with this.
If garlic mayo want to be a sponsor of the podcast, I love garlic mayo. I'm just going to have like Domino's garlic mayo, the Domino's garlic sauce, man.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why. It's the only reason why anyone gets Domino's.
Aye.
As far as I'm concerned.
Go get the big dip.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So there's something I've never talked about in the podcast before, sauces. So he was saying some of these questions I don't even understand, but I'll say, what does 45-year-old you look like?
Oh fuck. 45-year-old.
Where's your life going?
Well,
where do you want your life to go?
I mean, if he's still here, that would be fucking great. So let's assume he's still here, right? So I feel like my eyes would have gone from 2 meters apart to 4 meters apart. It's a joke. It'll be 6. No, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe grey hair. Probably have a beard by that point. I feel like I could rock that. You know, that like middle-aged.
You could.
It's 45 middle age. It is, isn't it?
But I mean, probably, yeah.
Because as much as, you know, if you think about the lifespan, it probably is. But I wouldn't call a 45-year-old middle-aged. I'd probably say like a 55-year-old would be middle-aged.
Well, see, I think now 45 is probably under that slightly.
Yeah.
Just because we live longer now, which is great. If you're in a good place. But, so I'd say 45, you could say it depends, I suppose it's hard because you can see somebody that's like 45 and be like, wow, they look great.
Yeah.
And then you can see somebody that looks 45 and looks 75 and you're like, yeah. But so I thought that, see, these questions are difficult to answer, right? But what about this, right? What's the weirdest thing to happen at a show?
The weirdest thing to happen at a show? There was something recently. We did a show, along with doing the sketch shows, I've started writing pantos. So we did an adult panto for the first time in December. We did it at the Stand. And
I hate that name.
What's that?
I hate that name.
What? The Stand? Yeah.
Just a wee wheelchair joke, guys, in case anyone didn't get that.
I know, and like, I want to, I want to react, and then I'm looking at a camera and I'm like, fuck.
Never be worried to laugh at the wheelchair jokes.
Is that something that you, I know we're getting away from the question here, but is that something that you feel a lot then? See, sometimes if you're with people and you want to talk about it or make a joke about it, do you find that uncomfortable sometimes, seeing the response?
I think, to be honest, it's one of those things where you do kind of get used to it, and I think everyone reacts to it differently. But the way that I sort of realise, I used to take it very personally, but you realise more as you get older that for a lot of people it's kind of like seeing an alien. Because it's like, they don't see people, you don't see people in wheelchairs about that often. You don't really go, we're not on TV. We're not getting, coverage in the media. For all the podcasts in the world, you don't see really anyone very much with a disability on these bigger platforms. So we're not actually that visible. So if you don't see us and you don't hear about us, and all that you really hear about disability is this negative thing of they need help and they're different and they're less able, you just look at us as this vulnerable, oh, that's a shame kind of group of people.
It's like the stories aren't, it's not like positive encouragement. It's always like we have to focus on the disability than rather the stories, or rather than, because I guess that's kind of what you're doing with this, is you're talking about people and their experiences, and rather than just focusing on like one thing. It's why, me and my mum talked about this recently. I thought one of the best representations I've ever seen was Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones. Because although it was referenced, it was referenced to so much to the character. There was so much about it, and that's what drove the story. It wasn't that we use him, the physicality of him to drive it. They didn't do that, which is what I really liked about it. It's
such a great point, because that's one of those examples where it was everything to do with the fact that he, when people talk about Game of Thrones, they go, Peter Dinklage, he was brilliant in that. They don't talk about the size he is or anything like that. They just go, what an amazing actor he is. And I think that because of the way disability is perceived kind of globally, there's this idea that, as well, like this idea that everyone, we need to be noticed as somebody with a disability. You need to be exceptional as something. So like Paralympic athletes, everyone goes, wow, they're amazing, right? But not everybody that has a disability is this inspirational, top tier athletic person, and I think what happens a lot of the time is if you're not used to seeing that, and you see me going about in a power chair, a lot of people are like, what's this? How do I react to this? What's the story? But that is exactly why we're doing these kind of things with the podcast, and when I post workout videos, and I'm talking about how, we're in an age now where we're able to get our own message out, and when I was younger, if I could have seen somebody with a podcast in a wheelchair talking about this kind of stuff, it would have been like life changing for me. Do you know how many years I would have helped me through hard times if I could hear somebody go, no, you can, like, we are, quote unquote normal. But then the thing is with normal is you just realise that, like, it doesn't actually exist. Everybody's literally different. But the point is that what me and you, when we talk about what we go through in our lives, as much as you can walk and I can't, the emotion's the same. We're all human. We all feel the same things. There's nothing that you've felt that, there's no way that there's like, every emotion you feel is valid, but it's not a new emotion, And I think that when you can connect through the kind of struggle that is life and how there's ups and downs and all that, and you remove any sort of physical or mental barrier and say, we're all human and we're all here and we all exist and we all face struggles. Because if I could walk and I didn't have cerebral palsy, I would still have struggles to go through that would be difficult. So it's not about what I can or can't do. It's about how I face things and what my perspective is and how I see the world and how I see myself. That's what's the most important thing. It's not about any sort of physical ability or mental ability. So I think that's sort of to answer your question. That's a long-winded way of answering your question.
No, it's good though. It's because I guess it's that thing of if you're not around it all the time, there's always that sort of, people have that, what do you call it, like pre-face towards it, where it's very much like, because I guess, do you find that with interactions with people sometimes where it's quite similar in the way that people like might first talk to you if they don't know you? Yeah. Like, do you find that there's patterns with that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it does vary, but I think that there's a lot of like kind of, or your people come up to you and just be like, oh, you're so inspirational. I had a guy, and it happens a lot, even people that you don't know anything about you, they just see you in a chair and go, you're such an inspirational person. And I'm like, based on what? The fact I'm sitting here, and I think it's just the idea, I had a guy, this is a pretty mean thing to say to somebody, right? But I had a guy come up to me one time. I was out on a night out with my pals that were also in wheelchairs, and I went up to get a drink, and I didn't know him at all when he came up to me and he said, I just want to say it's amazing to see you, coming out and being out, but it came across really patronising, and it was that kind of way where I was like, I don't even know you, and you're saying to me like, well done for coming out. So he was basically saying, well done for coming out, and I turned around and went, can I just say the same thing to you, like, well done to you? And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, coming out with that haircut, man, it's really, really brave to come out with that. And he was like, what a cheeky thing to say to me. And I'm like, well, that's exactly the same thing you've
exactly
done
what you've done,
it's like but I think people do, the thing is that I was a very angry guy for a while, especially when I was younger, in terms of the way that I seen disability and the way that disability seen me. But I think that, like, it's about realising that there are people that are good people that just don't know, and you can't take that personally. You can't be offended by that, because it's not that they don't want to know, it's that the coverage and the resources and the actual way that disability is perceived is so embroidered into them and into what they know. And you don't know unless you know somebody in a wheelchair, somebody with any kind of disability, what it's actually like. So I think there's a big thing of recognising that, people mean well for the most part, and trying to educate just through your own life experience and say, we're very much similar. We're very, there's physical barriers, but the main thing that kind of makes disability more noticeable is the lack of access to things, the lack of opportunity, and that's what this platform and what we're trying to do is just, if you can break it down for a few more people, and then every generation it gets better and better. That's what the main, because if everything was accessible, then there would be so much less stigma around it, because you could be able to go. You know, how many times I went to go in and out and there's been no access to something or something like that. I just feel like that's very much, you know, because if everybody couldn't walk, and there was a couple of people that could walk, they would be the outcasts. You know, I always use Elf as an example of that. Have you ever, you know, the movie Elf?
Yeah.
When he goes to the North Pole. Will Ferrell is like, we define Will Ferrell as a fully able human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to the North Pole, and the elves are like, we don't know what to do with this guy, because he can't fit into anything. Everything's too small for him, and they're like, where do we put him? We can't do this, he can't do that. Where do we put him? But he is, by definition, what we would classify as a fully able human. But in that environment, is basically disabled, because it's not accessible to him. The environment doesn't suit what he needs. So it's almost like disability is created somewhat by the environment in which we live in, rather than, because I have no control over whether I'm in a wheelchair or not. You could slip in the shower and be in a wheelchair tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't. It's like in that. But the idea, I would like to get away from that. The idea of that being this terrible thing, because the only reason why it is this terrible thing is because when that happens to you, and you, whether you're disabled or you become disabled, what you realise is that this is going to limit my life opportunities. It's going to limit me going to places. It's going to limit me being able to have jobs in certain areas. Like, it's about making all of these things more accessible, so that then being disabled or becoming disabled isn't as life limiting as it is right now. So that's what how I would answer that. But I feel like, and I appreciate you asking that, but like, that is the main reason why we're kind of doing this kind of thing. And I can, it's nice when you sort of see the wheels turning and somebody says it, though, I've never thought of it like that, or and I hope that's sort of helpful to you.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and I think, like, it's good. I think because, you know, we've been talking about so much already that I'm like, you're asking me things that I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know if I'd ever usually get asked a question like that or think about it. And it's that comfortability, isn't it, where you feel like you can just talk about things. And
I'm glad. Like, that I try and take pride in wanting guests to feel like we can have a personal conversation and get to know each other more like that. Did you tell me what was the weirdest thing that happened at the show, or did we get sidetracked?
I was actually just thinking about that. I was like, because I was like, oh, I swear he asked me a question. Right, weirdest thing that happened at a show. So the weirdest thing that happened at a show was recently, and it was in Glasgow, and we were doing a panto, and this show was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's two weird things, actually. The first one was, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the run up to Christmas, and this woman, I can only assume she was a massive Gary Meikle fan, but we'd started singing a song right at the start of the show, so it must have been like 4:10, and I just, through like the dark room, could just see this person standing up, like dancing about like this with a drink in their hand, and I'm like, it's 4:10 in the afternoon. this is really, really weird. And then I didn't think anything of it. I went off, came back on, and seen our pals carrying her out. Like, she couldn't stand. Like, she was that drunk that she was being carried out. So that was kind of weird, just because of the time. I mean, we've seen that sort of thing before, but like not that early. It was kind of weird. Probably the other thing was a guy sitting in the front row. He was vaping. Like, but his feet were on the stage, and he was just sitting there vaping, like, into us. I thought that was pretty weird. And then they cut him off from drinks because they thought he was just being a bit rude, so the staff cut him off. So for the rest of the show, he was in the front row, sat just looking at his phone, like totally raging. So that was really weird.
Do people, like, at shows being drunk, does that make it harder sometimes? Because I think people can, you know, like, in terms of when you're doing a show, if, like, I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's better when the crowd can't drink because then they're more focused on the actual show itself.
Yeah, I don't really care. I personally don't really care about that. I'm kind of like, the way I see it is, for a lot of people, they've paid to get a babysitter. They've paid to, come into wherever it is that you're asking them to go see a show. It's their right to go have a drink and enjoy themselves and take the night off. It's a whole experience. It's not just the one show. And for me, that's how I view it. Is I'm providing them a night of entertainment, but they're there to have fun and enjoy themselves. And if that means going out and getting pissed with their pals, go out and do that.
Do you like a drink yourself?
Now and again, aye. Yeah.
You ever done it? Your pals are watching this like aye now and again?
Aye, now and again, aye.
Do you ever do a show like Stephen?
No, it's a big thing for me. I don't... No, there's times where we were doing Fringe 2 years ago. It's 28 shows, like day in, day out. On top of that, you're doing gigs as well, right? So we'd gone to the Edinburgh stand to do a show, just to promote the one we were doing. And because we'd just finished our solo show, we were then going to the theatre. I had about an hour to kill, and my pals were coming. So they were like, right, come have a drink. So I had like 2 drinks, and then I had one backstage as well. So before that, I've had 3 drinks. I think that's one of the best I've ever performed, right? That show was brilliant. And that's why I'll never do it again. Because I was like, hang on a minute, that was really, really good. But if I start thinking that now, and I start, I've definitely had, there's definitely times I've had like maybe a pint before, or just sitting and waiting, but
that's so good for you, but it's so good, the self-awareness to be like, if I get used to having to be drunk to be that good, then there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and that's the thing, like you need to be aware of that. And I definitely thought that I really enjoyed how loose that performance was, and the laughs that I was having. I wasn't drunk, or not at all, but I was quite loose, and it gave me a sense of confidence. I'm already quite confident, but I was like, yeah, oh no, that's bad if I start doing that.
Yeah, no, like, but it's so good to be able to like recognise that.
Yeah.
You have a show coming up.
I do.
Soon, I believe.
Yeah, it's next week. Do you want me to talk about it? Were we talking about it?
Yes, shall we? Go ahead.
So on the 30th of March, next week, next Saturday, we are doing a solo show. It's part of the Glasgow Comedy Festival. It's St Luke's in Glasgow. It's we jingle that for a full hour, and we have a support act who'll be on to do 20 minutes before us. So yeah, if you're free, come along. Have a couple of pints. I certainly won't be, but yeah, come along, have some fun, and it'd be good to have you along. I've also got a tour to announce soon as well, but I don't have any info on it yet.
We shall put the tour in
yeah, sure, but that'd be great, man. When does this come out? When does this?
Well, that's a good question. It'll come out at some point next week.
Oh, because I'll have all that information by then. So yeah, if you don't mind, I'll fire it along.
That is great. We'll put that in there then.
Cool.
It just means that we can get the word out for all the great things you're doing. So that's. But listen,
Look at me, eh?
This has been a lot of fun. Though I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
You're really smashing it, man. And I appreciate your ability to be kind of open and vulnerable with me. I feel like that's because I kind of.
I have a wee cry now.
Exactly. We'll just, as soon as the camera goes off, we're just going to start combusting into tears, and that's kind of how most of these podcasts ends. People don't realise that. Like I had Rayleigh's gaff on, and they were like, "What? I feel like you're like my therapist or something like that." That's not what I'm trying to do, and I do want to clarify that I am not a qualified mental health professional. The guy behind the curtain is a qualified mental health professional, Paul. I just talk from my own experiences, and I think that there's a really good way of connecting with people through what we go through in our lives, and that's just kind of something I like to sort of touch on.
Yeah.
But is there anything you say is like you want to do in the future? As like, have you got like any big goals in your head?
Yeah, do you know what? Like, probably the main one is to get longer form writing out. Like, I really, really want to write a sitcom. I was so close to getting a pilot at one point. I did like a mini series about a father and a son on BBC Short Stuff. We were really close to getting a pilot, and I just keep thinking that's where I see this for me is love what I do with the boys, and I really hope we can just keep doing that. But on top of that, I'd love to just write something, explore a world, like create my own world up and make a show out of it. I think that's kind of the dream. I think everybody wants a wee BBC show. That's the.
You should do it with starting somebody, not me because I'm not a good actor, but somebody in the wheelchair or something like that. Have it be. You could do your own Scottish version of Elf. Like, why does nothing work in here? I can't do it. No, but listen, that's cool. I think as well, the way that you write and your level of writing, you'll get there eventually, man. You're doing it.
Hope so, yeah.
You're smashing it, and I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy you came on and really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, man. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.